Most people, if they have the option of living with a budget or just spending wildly, are definitely going to spend wildly. And we see that happening today a lot. But there are a few of us who believe that budgeting is good, it works, and it's something we should do. However, you may think you're budgeting, maybe making all of these budgeting mistakes so you're not seeing the results you want. Let's take a look. Today, budgeting is kind of a topic that just keeps coming up. Everyone says, hey, we're spending too much money, inflation is through the roof, and everything costs more. So it actually has never made more sense than today to really learn about budgeting. So a lot of people will do the diligence and sort of go online and maybe watch a couple of budgeting videos and learn about this percentage and that percentage and how much I should be putting into savings. But then what happens? Nothing really changes in their life, right? They notice that they're still in debt. They still don't have enough money. They're still struggling day to day, week to week, month to month. Worse yet, maybe they're going into more debt. How is that happening? Well, there are these top budgeting mistakes that you may be making, and you have to learn about them in order to not do them, right? Knowledge is power. So if you know, maybe we can expose these mistakes for what they really are, which is huge financial pitfalls. So let's talk about them from the top. The first top budgeting mistake that people might be making is they're doing it mentally, but they don't actually have a budget that's on paper. In other words, you say, okay, I make $1,000 a week, so I know I shouldn't spend more than $1,000 a week, and as long as I don't do that, I'm okay. So you know, if you go out and there's a huge purchase that's $500, $600, $700, you're like, nope, not in my budget. That's what you tell yourself. Or if you go out for a meal, you're like, I'm not going to have the $50 a plate thing. I'm going to have the $20 a plate thing because that's in my budget. But is it really? Do you know what your budget really even is? Mentally, you're telling yourself you're living off of a budget. Mentally, you're saying something, but physically, you're not doing it. A real budget, you have to write it down. You have to put it pen to paper, and you have to come up with all your categories and then come up with your percentages and say, okay, I'm going to pay myself first, and I'm going to give myself 20%, and I'm going to do 30% towards my short-term expenses and 30% towards my needs and X amount towards my savings. You have to actually break it down, and you have to look at it. If you don't look at it and you don't really break it down according to what is truly coming in, you're not budgeting. You just are saying that you are living off of a budget. And that's very, very different. The next thing people do is not track actual spending. See, it's good in the beginning when you are going to come up with a budget is to just track it, even for just a couple of weeks, so that you can see where you're weak, where you're spending too much money, and where you're strong. So you want to know what your actual expenses are, and that's usually easy to figure out. You know, your rent, your mortgage, your car payment, your car insurance, maybe how much money you have spent on fuel. But maybe you don't know how much money you've spent on fuel. So what you do is you get a handy dandy little notebook and you start writing these things down. Every time you stop for gas, every time you grab a cup of coffee, every time you have a meal out or have something delivered, which you shouldn't do. But every time you do that, you start to write it down, and now you know. Maybe you made a point of purchase sale that you aren't proud of, like you're buying sticks of chewing gum and the National Enquirer and some breath mints and whatever when you're in the checkout line at Walmart. The point is, you don't really realize all those little purchases until you write them down. Now you're able to see where your money is truly going, and that is what helps you to actually create a real budget. You have to track your spending. You cannot do just an estimate of what you think you've spent, and that's what most people do, is they kind of sort of estimate, and then they tell themselves they make X amount a week, and I only have this to spend, but they don't really know, not really what's coming in and what they're really spending. You have to create a real budget that's written down, and you have to track your spending. When you do it for the first 2 or 3 weeks, then you have some real numbers to work with, and you know what's coming in and what's going out. The next thing people do is they have an unrealistic budget. So there are people who say, all right, I'm going to get serious. I'm going to start saving money. I'm going to put money away towards these bills. I'm going to chip away at this credit card debt I have, and I'm not doing anything. No eating out, no going out with friends. Tuesday night bowling is canceled indefinitely. This is going to be the worst Christmas ever, but I'm not spending any money. This is a bad idea. When you go cold turkey, can people really sustain that? Think about it. You went from being a spender, right? From going out and maybe spending too much money eating out or getting coffee on the way to work every day or doing your Tuesday night bowling with friends. Whatever it is, once you cut out all of that fun and your brain sends this signal to your body that life sucks. And what am I even working for? And what am I doing? And I'm working all week long, and now I can't even go out and have a drink with friends. Now I can't even order a meal and enjoy something that I really like, or do Sunday, Super Bowl parties with friends watching football. When you cut out everything and you just do it like that, it really sends the wrong signal, and it's unsustainable. That's the real problem. You might be able to do it for a few days. You might even be able to do it for a week or two. But after that, you are going to blow up and you're going to go make stupid purchases because you're just going to say, I deserve it. I've been so good. I've been doing so well. It's better when you rationalize it out, you write it down, and you give yourself some money for fun. Maybe it's less. Maybe it's less than you're used to, or less than you've been spending. But as long as you normalize it and you can still go out and do things, maybe just not as often, maybe just not as much, or maybe when you do go out, you have more of a budget that you can spend less, right? You're just not going to spend as much money, but you're still going to do the things that you enjoy doing. Life is not meant to just be us cooped up in some cave somewhere, living like miserable people, warming our hands by a fire, waiting for our next kill. We're not cave people anymore. We want to go out and enjoy the fruits of our labor and the great things this world has to offer. And you should, but you have to be realistic about it. Don't have an unrealistic budget. You surely will not be able to stick to it. The other thing that a lot of people do as a budgeting mistake is that they remember their regular expenses, but they forget anything that's long-term or reoccurring. So all the time I have people come in and sit down in front of me and they're doing a budget and they write down things like, well, my rent is this, my food is this every week, my car payment is this, and I set aside a couple bucks for entertainment because I like to go to the movies on Friday. Okay, great. What they do is forget all of the annual stuff. I said, well, you have car insurance. I didn't see that in your monthly. Oh, I pay that twice a year. Oh, that's great because you get some good savings doing it, but I don't see it in your budget. You're not accounting. So the day's going to come that huge insurance premium is due, maybe for $1,500 or $2,000 or more. Where's that money coming from? I don't see where that line item is. Where is it coming from? You have to account for it like it's happening every month, even though it's only going to happen a couple times a year. What about the holidays, right? Do you celebrate holidays? Do you celebrate Christmas or New Year's? Do you do anything on those holidays? Oh, yeah, we always go away for New Year's. We rent a room and we go watch the ball drop in New York. Oh, great. Like, where's the line item for that, right? Do you have children? Yeah, we have 2 kids. Do you celebrate their birthdays? Do they eat, right? What do they do? How do you keep your children alive? So, of course, you have to allot for all of these things. Car maintenance, that's something that comes up. Do you guys travel? Yes, we take 2 vacations a year. One is just a weekend camping trip, and one is, a week away. We want to go to the Grand Canyon this year. Okay, well, where is that? So they remember the regular expenses in their budget, but they don't put anything in for anything that happens annually, long-term, once a year, or one day a year. They just don't account for that. Then when it hits, they're totally screwed because they say, oh my God, Christmas again. I wasn't ready for this. I don't have anything in savings. I wasn't planning. I have this birthday. It's my best friend's birthday, my mom's birthday, my husband or wife's birthday. And where are you going to get the money to do that? What is the saying? Failing to plan is planning to fail. You have to have a plan, and all of those things have to go into your regular budget. So remember your day-to-day, your week-to-week, your month-to-month, but then all of that long-term stuff, that has got to go in there right up until things like your car maintenance and stuff that you wouldn't expect to happen, right? Home maintenance, healthcare. There's just so many things in there, but you have to put it all in and you have to account for every little thing. The next thing people do in their budgeting that really sucks is that they don't have an emergency fund, no POM, so no peace of mind account. They have all these line items and they'll say, well, I've got my regular bills covered and that's it. Like that's all the money there is. And they put nothing away for an emergency. Now, of course, it would be good to have 3, 4, 5, 6 months of emergency money to cover your bills, but that may be much for most people. So I think a 1 to 2 month emergency fund is at least a good place to get started. You will sleep better at night. It really doesn't take much to start putting something away. Maybe it's only $40 a week. Maybe it's only $50 a week. But you know what? If you do that for 6, 7, 8 months, you'll have something there that you can see. If you then dump that into a, high yield savings account that's earning you between 4 and 5%, you're really going to start to see it build up. It's not the amount, it's the habit, it's the consistency. Having something in there will just make you feel good. Maybe you won't need it. I pray you don't, but emergencies come up all the time, and you probably will. So having a 1 to 2 month emergency fund is definitely a line item that should be in your budget. You should be putting something away for that all the time. I know what you're saying, but I need it in other areas. But here's the thing. Life is happening all the time, and you're going to need that too. That's a very important line item, is having an emergency fund. If you have a budget, put it in there. The next thing that you should do if you are not going to make this budgeting mistake is you should base your budget on your after-tax income, on your net, not the gross. The net is the money that you're actually taking in after you pay taxes. Gross is pre-tax. It's like that larger amount that you see. So someone might say, hell, I know I can afford to spend $1,000 a week. I make 52 grand a year. That's $1,000 a week, right? But you're basing it off of your gross. I mean, do you live somewhere where you pay taxes? You probably do. So if you do, even in a small tax bracket, people are going to pay between 10 and 20%. So let's just slice it down the middle and say you're paying 15%. On $1,000, you're really taking home $850 a week. I mean, that is your take home. So if you say I could spend $1,000 a week, well, you're probably already going into debt, right? You probably already have things that you're behind on. You're probably using credit cards. You've probably got subscriptions that aren't paid, and you probably have payment plans with things like department stores or cars or insurances or anything like that, because you aren't actually pulling in that $1,000 a week. You're really only pulling in $850 a week. So you have to base your budget off of what is really hitting your bank account. And that's why it's important to know what you're really, truly bringing in. Most people do not. If you are spending that $850 a week, you're also still living too close to the edge. You want to account for everything, but you want to make sure you're putting something away. That's what a budget is for. It's to make sure you have money today as well as tomorrow. That's why we have all these different categories. How do we do that? Well, I would probably start by saying I'm probably right off the top going to kind of make pretend and live in la la land and say I only make $750 a week. Right? And I'm going to base my budget off of $750 a week, not $850 a week. I know I'm bringing in $850, but I'm going to say I'm only bringing in $750. That's what I'm telling myself. So I can lob off $100 right off the top to just put into a POM account, just for peace of mind, just for later on. Remember, that's still your money. You still have it. Hell, it's actually now going to work for you because you can put it in a good account where it's going to earn some interest. So it's like you having another income. You should be excited to just peel off $100 and make $750 your actual budgeting amount. So base your budget off of your real income. That's your take-home income after tax. The next thing that a lot of people do is, this is a terrible budgeting idea, but they involve credit. They make X amount of money, but they also involve the use of credit cards. Well, if I need extra money, I'm just going to spend it on a credit card, right? So they borrow money. That's what you're doing when you're using a credit card. You are borrowing. Anytime you get involved in a payment plan for something, you are also borrowing money. That's still borrowing. And look at the fine print because there's interest there. Anything that's paying interest or you're borrowing money, like say a subscription, food delivery, tipping on a credit card, anything that involves that sort of credit and that use of borrowing is like paying another tax. You're already paying tax. We've already dumbed your $1,000 a week down to $850, remember? And now you're going to go spend that money in a way that actually is going to pay more tax because you are borrowing and you're now involving high interest rates. Well, that's another mistake people make because now you may be budgeting. I mean, I would take that $850 and dumb it down to $750, but let's say you don't. Let's say you just take that $1,000, you pay your tax, and you have $850 to budget with. If you start using some of that $850 and spending it in a way in which you are borrowing, getting involved in subscriptions, getting involved in credit card use, getting involved in high rates of food delivery with taxes and tip involved, you are cutting into that $850 even more. So your budgeting is going to get screwed up right from the very beginning, and you're not going to know why. But you don't really have $850 to work with because you're paying a higher tax through all of that interest rate. So it gets dumbed down even more. So this is a huge budgeting mistake that people make. If I'm, say, going to act as if I make $700, $750, let's just use $700. What I might do is I might use a very basic budget. I've had several different budgets, and I'm going to give you one that I kind of like right now, and we're going to end with that. A good budget, just for most people, might be 30, 30, 30, 10. What does that exactly look like? 30%, that means I'm going to cut out the first 30% from me. That's for my spending. That's for my wants, basically. In my case, I tend to also use some of that wants money for little needs, right? Because it means I need less money in the actual needs category, right? If I'm going to buy things like deodorant or coffee for one of my businesses or just anything, I may use some of that money, some of that first 30%, but really that's what I want to spend money on. If I want to eat a frivolous meal out, no problem. If I want to go for a long drive and grab a cup of coffee and listen to some tapes or something, I can just do that and be blowing fuel, and that's my money. Okay, I've chosen to do with that first 30% what I will, and it's mine to do. That's called paying myself first, and that makes me feel good. The next 30% is going to go towards my actual needs. That's bills. That would go to a rent, a mortgage. I don't have car payments, but if you have a car payment, you would put that towards a car payment. You may put that towards insurances. You may put that towards healthcare, right? So all of your short-term needs are in the second 30%. The next 30% is going to be my long-term expenses, bills that come up once in a while, once a year, twice a year, things that I'm saving up for that I need to pay. It's still going to be a bill, but it's something that I have to save up for, and I want to have that. Also, if I can build up some money out of that 30%, beyond paying my bills, I can use it for investments. So that is really long-term savings to pay additional bills and maybe put some aside to invest. So that's 30, 30, 30. 30 for me, 30 for short-term needs, 30 for long-term needs. What's the last 10%? That's my POM account. That's my peace of mind account. What should every budget have? It should have an emergency fund. You should have some money set aside for peace of mind so that you can sleep at night if the shite should hit the fan. And things happen, and they're going to happen again. People were not prepared for COVID. They were not prepared for the financial crisis of 2008. They were not prepared for the stock market crash in the 1920s. The point is, things are going to keep happening in life. And economies are going to rise and economies are going to fall. And how you weather the storm is how well you are prepared for it. And that's with a good, solid budget. My name is Daniel F. Margasa. You are watching The Almost Criminal Millionaire. And if you enjoy learning about the topics of finance, money, and the health and wealth of your bank account, then please like and subscribe for more.